legislator gets lost this time of year. I can't tell you how many high B's and streets I've been to, and they failed to put the address in my address book. And so I started out on 163rd, and then I came here, and I wandered around downstairs quite a while, but I'm here. I apologize for being late. I didn't really come with any prepared remarks because, hi Kim,
Hi.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Because I would like to take as many questions and address those issues that you might be concerned about. But just speaking generally, I came to the legislature 11 years ago. I came out of the private sector, and I felt very strongly about economic development, jobs, and education. I'd never been involved in politics in my life, and having run a business, I knew you had to make ends meet. You couldn't spend more than you took in. And I'll never forget going home and visiting with my wife about a month after I'd been there, and she said, well, what do you think? And I said, I've observed two things. People really like this job, and it's sure easy to spend someone else's money. And that still holds true. It's sure easy to spend someone else's money. And as Kim will probably tell you, you get down inside the Golden Dome and it becomes another world entirely. And we have creep on spending. People come to you and they say, well, this is a good program, that's a good program. Can't you just give a little more? And that's why we've seen the amount of money that we spend increase dramatically over the years. Now, coincident to that is as we spend more money, we are hiring more government workers, and as we hire more government workers, we continue to see mission creep. And one of the things that we've seen mission creep in over the last 12 years in particular, we see a lot of rules and regulations written by unnamed, faceless, unelected bureaucrats that have an impact on your daily lives. And people that face this can't understand, well, how does this happen or why does this happen? For example, there's a quarry up around Waterloo that is inspected. They have a porta potty on the site, and the inspector came out and they found a cobweb, so they fined them $150. Or it's the lady in southwest Iowa that has an engineering degree. She and her husband bought a farm, bought 20 goats. They wanted to develop a value-added agricultural business, which is precisely what we need to do in this state. They thought, well, we'll start making cheese. So they're making goat cheese. There's a very strong market for gourmet goat cheese. Now, the byproduct of goat cheese is a liquid which consists of about 98 to 99% clear water and some curd. Now, when you lived on the farm, you fed that curd to the hogs, or you threw the water on the yard or in the garden, and everything was fine. Well, DNR came down and said, no, that's an industrial waste. They made them put in $20,000 worth of equipment to handle that liquid. That's $1,000 per goat. Now that lady says, I would have never started this business had I known what would happen. Or it's the McDonald's owner in Ottumwa. It's not McDonald's, it's Burger King actually. That has a Burger King in Ottumwa. He has an identical one in Missouri. He pays over $40,000 a year property tax in Iowa and $12,000 in Missouri. So it's little things like this that over the years have created an atmosphere which is absolutely anathema when they're all totaled up. One of the things most people aren't aware of is that when laws are passed, they go to the executive branch to have rules written which then fill in the blanks and tell the administration or the executive branch how to deal with and all of the details. Most people aren't aware of this. A lot of legislators aren't aware of this. I didn't really know about it until I sat on the Rules Committee for 5 years. The rules are supposed to comport with the intent of legislation. But I've sat on the committee, I have seen rules written for laws I have been a major author on. They've been 180 degrees from the intent, and there's really check on that. That is how we have seen creep in government control, both at a state level and at a federal level. The new Obama health care bill, for example. There are thousands of rules that will be written with that. So we've been conducting hearings across the state. We've gone to 11 cities over the past 2 months to talk to folks and listen to stories about what are the nightmares that you're experiencing. And it's been extremely eye-opening. The governor is absolutely committed to getting this under control, because over the past 12 years, between Governor Vilsack and Governor Culver, they have made governing through the rulemaking process an art form. And when you do that, you don't need a legislature, and that was precisely what they've done. They appoint activists to boards and commissions, and those activists implement their agenda through the rulemaking process. That's why we don't have a new power plant in Marshalltown, for example. So that's been a real problem. We have learned lots and lots of things that will be helpful. And this past Monday, the governor rescinded, it's only the second time in about 40 years that a governor has actually used this power to rescind what were called the Rice Rules. It required every utility, every little co-op, electric co-op in the state, to have a backup diesel engine retrofitted so that it would meet some obscure emission law that was probably plucked out of the air. Many of these only operate. We had testimony from one manager of a co-op that said he runs his 20 hours a year just to determine that it's functioning properly. They're not used at all, and yet would have cost millions of millions of millions of dollars to have implemented this. So that's one of the things they're doing. One of the things I want to talk about in a little bit of detail, and it's something we probably don't talk about enough, at least in detail, and that's if we're going to get spending under control in this state, where do we go? I believe we spend way, way more money than we need to spend. I think we could cut our budget dramatically and do a better job of governing. But where do you go to do it? We hear a lot of people say that, but then when you get into the details, you really don't get anywhere, because it's really difficult to start pointing out specifics. You cannot solve the problems, economic problems of this state, or the job preparedness of this state, or creating a workforce of trained people with skills and knowledge without getting into the issue of education. Education consumes 60% of the state's budget. You can't do it. It's impossible to do. Between education and human resources, DHS, you've got 85 to 90% of the budget. You could cut the rest out, and you would still not do what you had to do. Now, everybody will say, well, education is important. It's an investment in our future, and I agree. It's probably the most important thing we do. Iowa had a once proud heritage of being #1 in the nation in education. In 1993, our Iowa 8th grade math students were #1 in the nation. Here we are in 2011. They've slipped to 28th in the nation. They have shown less achievement growth than students in any other state. And in reading, we've shown less achievement growth than students in any other state. This is in spite of the fact that we've spent literally billions and billions of dollars following fads and doing things that the folks who oversaw this write-down tell us we need to do. And it's just, we just can't continue down that path. If you can't read, or if you don't know math, you're not going to be very successful, either as a citizen or in the global marketplace. So it is an extremely critical situation. It is a very delicate subject to talk about, because inevitably you get accused of being opposed to the kids or being opposed to teachers. It couldn't be further from the truth. We are very, very supportive of teachers. But I must tell you that we have 35,000 teachers in Iowa. When you have 35,000 of anything, you've got good ones and you've got bad ones. And we treat them all the same. And if you are in any private sector business and you have 35,000 employees and you treat them all the same, you're going to lose your best ones where they can go and work somewhere else, and you're going to be elevating the poorer performing ones. I think we absolutely must face the fact that education and teaching is probably the noblest profession, but there are people that probably should be in another profession. And until we begin to recognize that, I think we're not going to be addressing education the way we need to. Just to give you a couple of examples of how we've had debates this year on preschool. You've heard that. The governor wants to make it a means tested. In other words, he said everybody should have a little skin in the game, whereas the education establishment says it ought to be free preschool for everybody. There's a difference of about $100 million there. We've talked about several other issues in education that cost money. But I'll give you just one example. And I don't like to quote Tom Harkin, but it's $10 million. And even in state parlance, that's pencil dust. But still, it's $10 million. And we had a bill come before the Senate. I don't know if you guys have had it yet. For community colleges. We all think community colleges do a great job. But what it did, $10 million appropriation a year. What it did, it said we are going to put $5 million of that to training people who are unemployed, who are persistently unemployed. The underemployed and unemployed, the hard-to-employ folks in non-credit courses. So $5 million a year to that. The other $5 million a year will be used for marketing and locating where those people are. Now, excuse me, we know where the unemployed are. We've got 100,000 unemployed Iowans. I'm not even sure that the community colleges asked for this. But this is on top of the fact that we have $60 million a year that's going into job training already. Yeah.
Why can't they give some tax incentives to some of these employers where they'll go out and hire them and train them right inside? Because I'll guarantee you the kids that come out of most of these community colleges aren't worth the pencil dust to hire them. They don't teach them nothing. It's a waste of money. Give the money to the employer, give them some tax incentives, and we'll hire them and we'll train them, and then they'll be a good employee.
That's where most of the job training comes anyways, on-the-job training.
Yes.
And as one of the trustees on one of the community colleges down in my area said, who works with one of these training centers, said, we can't fill these slots. We spend $60 million a year on what's called 260 E&F training. There was a major article in the Des Moines Register this last fall that identified Iowa spends more than any other state. I think it was $17,000 or $18,000 per training, I'm not sure. We are spending tons of money. But that bill, that $10 million a year appropriation slid through like that without hardly any discussion at all. So those are the issues we face, and that's, frankly, it's a troubling situation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I don't think you're saying anything to